I'm sitting here by Fritz, my 1982 80 SE Euro model, and I've begun making a list of things I need to fix on the car. You know, as I'm writing this down, I'm thinking, man, I've seen this list before. In fact, I've probably seen this list more than 100 times before. You can't imagine the hundreds of old Mercedes I've drug home over the last 20 years. And after a while, you start to see a pattern, and you see things that are neglected. And what I want to share in this video is 10 things that I see are most often neglected. Even if the car has been into a shop or been maintained by a mechanic, sometimes it's not the mechanic's fault. Sometimes the owner doesn't want to pay for these type of things. But these are the things I see over and over and over again. In fact, 3 out of the 4 last cars that I've drug home here to the shop kind of all have this same problem. And as I go through these, I'll jump around to a couple other of these cars and show you why it's so common. This is probably what motivated me to do this business, you know, a long time ago, was to help people fix some of these common problems, even if you're not a mechanic. I was just talking to Jerson earlier this morning. You really can't own a car like this 280 SE Euro 126 sedan unless you're going to work on it. For one thing, there's a lot of mechanics today, they don't want to work on these old cars because they touch one thing and then something else breaks, and then the owner is of course upset because they think the shop broke it. The other problem is there's a lot of mechanics don't know how to work on these old cars. They don't have the experience. But if you get one of these cars and think you're just going to take it into a shop all the time to get things fixed, well, I'm not saying that's not possible. I'm just saying that the honeymoon could be over very quickly. And one of the reasons I end up with cars like this is finally the owner has to admit they just can't keep it maintained. Either they can't find a mechanic or they can't afford to pay a mechanic to do all these things that I'm going to talk about in this video. So I've got 10. There's probably 20, maybe there's 15, but these are 10 of the most common items I see on the old cars. We're talking 20, 25, 30 years or older that you might acquire, and you might want to save this list and look at it yourself. Number 1 on my list are fuses. That's right, good old fuses. How many times have I harped on this over the years? I probably have at least a dozen videos that address this issue with fuses, and yet I continue to get these old cars that have old corroded aluminum fuses in the fuse box causing all kinds of electrical problems. It's a very easy job and very inexpensive to remove the aluminum fuses and put in a brass copper alloy fuse that will not corrode. We're talking about dissimilar metal corrosion that occurs inside these fuse boxes. So in a little bit here, let's open up Fritz's fuse box and see how it rates, okay? Number 2 are the shift bushings. Once again, how many times have I harped on this? But 3 out of the 4 cars that I've recently drug home all have loose shift bushings. And you can feel the shifter rattle, and you can hear it rattle while you're driving the car. And you may say, well, that's not a big deal until you go to park the car, put the car in park, and come back and see that it has rolled down the hill and smashed into some other car. And yes, that has happened. So I'll show you what shift bushing in Fritz here feels like in a minute. Number 3 are the drains, the engine compartment water drains. You cannot believe how many problems I've seen caused by plug drains. That's right, water not getting out, water collecting in the corners of the engine compartment causing all kinds of problems, including leaks that you may never find. You may have already owned a Mercedes where you've had the windshield rubber replaced, you've had the sunroof seals replaced, maybe you even had the door seals replaced, and yet you're still getting water on the carpet and moisture on the glass when you get up to start the car in the morning. And a lot of times that's caused because the drains are plugged and water created rust holes in along the firewall or under the battery tray that allows water to leak down into the footwells of the passenger and cabin compartment. So this is really critical that you keep those water drains clean. The other one, number 4, is the hood pad. Look at the hood pad on Fritz. Now look at the hood pad on the white Ghost. Look at the hood pad on the green Ghost. Look at the hood pad on my 4.5. Oh, they're all bad. Now you might be laughing saying, well, Kent, the hood pad's not going to make your car run any better. But there are a couple things you need to be aware of if you haven't seen any of my other videos on hood pads. Number 1, this provides sound deadening, but it also provides protection for the paint of your hood. The excessive heat can get on this metal and transmit through to the car's paint, particularly if it has clear coat, and you'll get that cracking and peeling and discoloration of the clear coat due to excessive heat into the paint. So I want to protect Fritz's original paint here, so I'm going to replace the hood pad. It also quiets the engine down. You know, these M110 6-cylinder engines tend to be a little noisy on the top end, and having a nice hood pad will kind of quiet that down as you're cruising down the freeway. Number 6 is power steering fluid. Now, how many of you have complained about loose steering gear boxes in these old Mercedes-Benzes? How many of you have driven one where you're going down the road and the steering wheel moves about 2 inches before you can actually feel it? That's very uncomfortable. And it's the same situation on all 4 of these cars. They all have loose steering. And what do you think causes that? You think it's just general wear? No, I think there's another reason. And you can't believe how ugly most of the power steering fluid is that I see when these cars that come into the shop. It looks like it's been in there for 10 or 15 years or longer. Some of it looks like molasses, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit more later about the importance of power steering fluid and what you can do to improve the overall performance of your steering gearbox and power steering unit, okay? Number 7, right behind power steering fluid, is brake fluid. Oh my word. Why don't people change brake fluid? I know it's kind of a hassle. If you learn how to do it yourself, particularly with my pressure brake bleeder, it's not all that difficult. And yet people will neglect it. You'll see brake fluid that'll look like engine oil because it's been in there so long. You think, well, no big deal. Yeah, but this brake fluid absorbs moisture. The moisture gets into the calipers. It seizes the pistons in the calipers, which wears the rotors prematurely and can affect braking performance and is even a safety issue. So you really don't want to neglect changing brake fluid. It should be changed every 2 years. So once again, later on we'll check the brake fluid right in here and see how Fritz fares, all right? Number 8, motor mounts. Now, you may say, well, that's not a big deal, but I've seen in one particular case a diesel engine ruined because the motor mounts were shot and the engine was just banging against the frame. It actually took out a connecting rod. That's an extreme case. But most of the time it's comfort. You'll feel vibration through the car. You'll feel vibration in the seat. And the engine will shake a little bit more than it should, even on a gas engine like this. A lot of times you can just look at the motor mounts and see that they're collapsed. Other times you can turn the engine off and see how it feels, and if it shakes or makes noise, it's a good indication that you may have a motor mount problem. And for number 9, I've chosen wipers. Now that seems to be obvious to most of us. You know, you probably should change your wipers so you can see where you're going when it's raining. But once again, you can't believe the condition of the wipers I see on these old cars. Now granted, they've been sitting for a while. A lot of times the wipers will rot. But on other occasions, these cars are getting driven regularly, and I'll bring them here in the shop and the wiper blades are just shot. But it's not just the blade. There's something else going on with the wipers that you really need to pay attention to, and I'll talk more about that later in this video. And then finally, we're going to talk about engine compartment lubrication. Now there's 3 things in this grouping, so I just made it 1 instead of 3, but they have to do with the importance of lubrication in and around the engine compartment. And believe it or not, these 3 really get neglected. I don't think anyone does it at all, period. And the first one is hood hinge lubrication. You cannot believe how important this is. I've seen hood hinges break. I've seen hoods buckle because these hinges seize up. A lot of times that's due to plugged water drains, which get the hood hinges rusty. But if you keep the hood hinges lubricated, you'll have a lot better an easier opening hood, plus you won't have those problems in the future because you've got a lot of rainwater coming down through here and running and getting wet around the hinges assembly. So this is real important here. The other thing is throttle linkage. Oh my word, how many times I've been out driving cars, throttles are sticking or the transmission's not shifting properly, or you know, the performance is all over the board, and it's a lot of times all it takes is lubricating all the hinges and all the ball joints on your throttle linkage. Once again, I hardly ever see that get done. And finally, this is one I never have seen done, and that's lubrication of the hood latch assemblies. And you know, how many of us have either had this happen to us or we've heard about it if we're into old Mercedes, is have one day you go out and pull the hood release lever and snap, and the hood won't open, and you have to do something or check something, and you can't get in, and it can be a real pain. I recently did a video about that because my 4.5 in the background, when it arrived here at the shop from Seattle, the hood cable broke the first time I went to open the hood. Okay, and of course when I got in there, you know, the reason that wire snaps is because those latch assemblies and the release pivot point doesn't get lubricated, so there's so much stress on that. Over time you'll eventually break that cable. It's not expensive, it's a little bit of a pain to replace, and I've come up with kind of a special kit to help you do that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through this car, and I'll probably reference a couple other cars just to show you the significance of why I believe these are neglected. And we'll go over all 10 of these in parts 2 and 3. Now there's no need for you to write these down because at the end of the video I'll also list them in the show more part of the description below the video. Some of you may have other recommendations on what to check, but these are the ones I've seen over and over and over again over the last 20 or so years that I've messed around with these old Mercedes. And what I've done is I have focused on these, and over the years I've come up with instructions and manuals and special lubricants and tools and parts with instructions and other items that can help you fix these things yourself and do these things yourself. Even if you've only done an oil change on a car before, and you're kind of reluctant to do these type of things, if you acquire an old Benz, start out with these 10, okay? They can all be easily done by the DIY mechanic in your garage. The motor mounts, I would say, maybe, you know, is a little bit above a beginner DIY job, but it can be done. Particularly, I've written really detailed instructions on how to do this yourself. So I'm going to list all these in the show more part of the description below this video. I'll just go 1, 2, 3 through 10, and then I'm going to list all the links after each number that'll take you to other videos I've done, that'll take you to tools or parts you'll need to do these jobs yourself.